Welcome to Life Stories, where today a scarred waitress is humiliated in front of a room full of strangers until one man walks in and everything stops. What if the person you ignored every morning turned out to be the reason you're still alive? In a quiet roadside diner, beneath the clatter of coffee cups and careless laughter, lives a woman with a past so powerful it could silence an entire room. If only they knew. This is not a story about war. It's a story about what we fail to see, about judgment, memory, and the moment a forgotten hero chooses to stop hiding. Stay with us, because by the end of this video, you may never look at a stranger the same way again. Now let's step inside the diner and meet the woman behind the silence. The morning sun peeled across the cracked parking lot of Rusty's diner like a reluctant confession, its golden light failing to soften the harsh edges of Interstate 25's daily grind. Nestled just outside Colorado Springs, the diner had fed weary truckers, traveling salesmen, and the odd lost soul for over 4 decades. Its red vinyl booths bore the imprint of countless stories, most of them forgotten by lunch. Behind the counter, Emily Carter moved with the kind of deliberate grace that came not from joy, but from survival. She wore her white blouse with the sleeves rolled just enough to be functional, but never enough to reveal. At 37, Emily had the face of someone who had known silence more intimately than conversation. Her dark brown hair, tied back in a no-nonsense bun, framed features weathered not by time, but by fire. A network of scars coiled across her neck and down her left arm, scars she never spoke of, never explained. To most, she was just the waitress with the burns. The regulars had long stopped asking. Some made up stories, a grease fire, a car crash, maybe an abusive ex, but no one knew. And that's how she wanted it. 3 years of pouring coffee and keeping her head down had earned Emily something she valued more than recognition: invisibility. In this corner of post-military America, where thank yous came as hollow as empty medals, she had traded the weight of heroism for the comfort of obscurity. Her Bronze Star and Purple Heart gathered dust in a drawer back home, locked beside a folded uniform she hadn't touched since the VA stamped her medically discharged. The inked emblem of her old unit, 67th Forward Surgical Team, was hidden beneath fabric, just like everything else she carried. Then came the contractors. Travis and his crew rolled in every morning for eggs, bacon, and someone to mock. Their pipeline project up in the hills had made Rusty's their pit stop, and Emily their favorite target. She endured the jokes, Frankenstein, Scarface, Patchy, with the same stoic calm she'd once used to hold pressure on gaping wounds in Kandahar. But the cruelty still landed like shrapnel. "You spill that coffee on me, I'm suing for emotional damage," Travis laughed one morning, loud enough to draw chuckles from his crew. "Bet your last job was terrifying children on Halloween." Emily didn't flinch. She simply refilled their cups with the quiet dignity of someone who knew there were worse things than being laughed at. Like holding a 19-year-old boy's intestines in your hands while begging him to stay alive. Across the room, nobody intervened. The elderly couple by the window kept their eyes fixed on their oatmeal. A businessman scrolled his phone, pretending not to hear. The truth was, they saw the scars, but not the story. And stories, especially the painful ones, are easy to ignore when you're busy. That morning, something shifted. A man entered, early 40s, marine cap pulled low over salt and pepper hair. His name was Jack Donovan, though no one in Rusty's knew it yet. He walked with the rigid posture of someone who had slept in body armor and learned to measure people by how quickly they assessed exits. Emily noticed him the moment he walked in, not because he stared at her scars like most did, but because he didn't. He sat near the window, nodded politely as she approached, and ordered black coffee. Simple, no smirk, no judgment, just a long, curious glance at her left forearm as she poured. He noticed the way her sleeve shifted, revealing a flicker of ink, faded blue numbers, half hidden. Emily saw the flicker in his eyes, the kind that wasn't about attraction, but memory, recognition. "Thank you," he said quietly, with the weight of someone who meant it. Not for the coffee, for something else. The morning dragged on, eggs served, jokes hurled, dignity maintained, until Travis, emboldened by the usual indifference, decided to go further. "My toast's cold," he sneered. Maybe if she didn't walk like a busted Roomba, it'd still be hot. Emily froze, for a beat too long. Something inside her, tight and trembling, began to unravel. Before she could move, a small voice cut through the diner. Does it hurt? A boy, no older than 7, sat a few booths down with his mother. He stared at Emily's scars with the disarming honesty of a child untouched by cruelty. His mother gasped, mortified. Emily turned. Her voice was softer than anyone had ever heard it. Not as much as being forgotten, she said. And that's when Jack Donovan stood. He had been silent long enough. He crossed the diner in 3 strides, eyes locked on her left forearm. This time, when the sleeve shifted, he saw it all. A faded eagle, a bloodstain of memory. Kandahar? He asked. Emily didn't respond, but her jaw clenched. Her eyes flickered with fear. Not of him, but of what came next. You saved me, Jack whispered. IED, Route Dakota, March 18th, 2008. You were the one who climbed into that wreck, the one who wouldn't let go of my hand. Silence shattered the diner. Travis's mouth hung open. The elderly couple blinked stunned. Even the child was quiet. Emily stared at Jack, her world narrowing to a moment she had tried to forget every single day since that night. Blood. Smoke. Screams. Her hand pressing into a chest cavity, whispering, You're going to make it, Marine. Stay with me. You remember me? She asked, barely breathing. Jack took off his cap. Every single day. What would you do if the person you mocked turned out to be the reason you're still breathing? How long can someone run from their past before it finds them? Sitting quietly in a booth, ordering black coffee? In the stunned silence of Rusty's diner, everything Emily had buried was clawing its way back to the surface, and the next moment would change not only her life, but the lives of everyone who had ever looked at her and looked away. Emily didn't speak. She couldn't. The air in Rusty's had thickened, heavy with recognition, and something dangerously close to reverence. Jack Donovan stood like a ghost resurrected, carrying a truth she had buried so deeply it had begun to rot beneath her skin. Around them, eggs went cold. Coffee steamed, untouched. The child who had asked if it hurt now looked up at Emily with wide, unblinking awe. But it wasn't the boy or Jack or the gasps from the regulars that rattled her. It was the silence. That awful, raw silence after the truth is spoken aloud, when there's no longer anywhere to hide. Jack's words hit her harder than any mortar blast. You saved me. She had saved many. Too many to remember names. But she remembered the smell of diesel and the heat and the screaming and the way his blood had soaked into her gloves as she clamped a pressure dressing against shrapnel wounds too large for her hands. She had told him he was going to be okay, even though she hadn't believed it herself. And then she had forgotten, willed herself to forget. But he hadn't. I never thought I'd find you, Jack said, voice low but steady. I looked, I asked. They said you'd been discharged, said you disappeared. She had, by design. Disappearing was the only way she'd survived. Emily's jaw tightened. I didn't want to be found. Travis, still frozen at his table, finally spoke. Wait. Are you saying she's military? Jack turned to him with the cold calm of a man who'd once seen his own intestines spilling onto a road and lived to remember it. She's not just military. She's the reason I'm standing here, and she deserves your silence more than your jokes. A flicker of shame crossed Travis's face. But shame was easy. It came and went. Emily had seen deeper wounds, the kind that didn't heal with apologies. Bob, the diner's owner, emerged from the kitchen where he'd been hiding in passive management for years. He had a dish towel in one hand and the face of a man who had suddenly realized he'd failed someone important. Emily, he said, clearing his throat, why didn't you ever say something? Emily met his eyes. Because it wouldn't have changed anything. But the truth was, she wasn't sure anymore. Her scars had always been her armor, her silence the shield. The fewer people who knew, the fewer who could offer that look, the one Jack wore now. Not pity, something worse, reverence, like she was some relic, not a person. And yet, something inside her had shifted when Jack said her name. Not Miss, not Scarface. Carter? Jack reached into his pocket and unfolded a weathered photograph. This was my unit. Taken 2 days before the IED. You patched up every man in this picture. Every damn one of us came home because of you. Emily stared at it. 12 faces, youthful, bright, before the heat and the smoke and the screams. She remembered them, not names, but wounds. The one with the shattered femur, the kid with burns on both legs, the sergeant who wouldn't stop apologizing for getting his men hit. Her hand trembled as she took the photo, something cracking in her chest that hadn't made a sound in years. Then Jack's voice softened. I read your name on a list of medics awarded the Bronze Star, but there was nothing else. No interviews, no VA profile, no contact. Emily's voice, when it came, was barely more than breath. I didn't want to be a story. But you are, Jack said. You were the best thing that happened to us in that hellhole, and nobody knows. Emily turned away, needing air, needing anything but the weight of being known. She pushed through the diner's back door, stepping into the alley where the scent of fryer oil gave way to dust and exhaust. The wind hit her face like a slap, and still her skin burned hotter than it had in years. She wanted to scream, but didn't. She wanted to cry, but wouldn't. She had spent so long holding herself together that the idea of unraveling, of letting someone see the wreckage inside, was more terrifying than any battlefield. Jack followed, careful not to get too close. I'm not trying to expose you, but people need to know. No, she snapped. You need to tell someone. I don't. I did my job, then I got out. That was the deal. You call hiding in a diner a deal? Her eyes flashed. I call it peace. I didn't ask for medals. I didn't want thanks. I wanted quiet. But you didn't get it, Jack said softer now. You got humiliation. Every day. She didn't answer. Because he was right. And because for the first time she was tired, really tired, of pretending it didn't cut. Jack tried again. You don't have to stand alone anymore. Not here. Not now. Emily leaned against the cold brick wall, her body suddenly trembling under the weight of 3 long, buried years. If they find out, she said, they'll start treating me different, like I'm made of glass, or worse, like I'm made of gold. Jack nodded. Yeah, some will, but some might finally see you for who you are. Inside the diner, through the grimy window, Travis and his crew sat motionless, their faces hollow. The boy was still watching the door, waiting for Emily to return. And Bob, staring at the empty spot behind the counter, looked like he'd just realized the backbone of his entire business wasn't his hash browns or bottomless coffee. It was her. Would you reveal your true self, knowing the world might never see you the same again? As Emily stared down the alley, caught between the past that defined her and the future clawing to expose it, the question remained. Was survival enough, or was it finally time to live? The next morning, Emily arrived at Rusty's diner, 30 minutes early. The air was sharp with the chill of a Colorado spring, but she barely noticed. Her breath fogged the window as she pressed her palm against the glass, looking in at the quiet, unlit booths where she had spent the last 3 years blending into the wallpaper of people's lives. Yesterday had changed everything, and she knew there was no going back. Bob had offered to give her the day off, maybe the week, said he'd understand if she needed time. But Emily didn't want time. She wanted to reclaim her space, her rhythm, her name. Inside, she tied her apron with steady hands, adjusted her sleeves as she always had, but this time she let the tattoo show. By the time the bell above the door jingled and the first customer stepped in, word had already spread. The diner filled slowly, but something was different in the way people entered. They paused, looked at her, not with the crude curiosity of before, not with the discomfort that usually followed a glimpse of her scars. This was something quieter, deeper, a knowing. By 8 o'clock, the line for coffee reached the door. Veterans, mostly. Men and women in worn jackets with faded patches, baseball caps emblazoned with unit crests, boots that had seen deserts and mountains and God knew what else. Some walked with canes, others with limps. Many came alone. All of them came for her. Jack had said word would spread. She hadn't believed him. But now they came. Those who remembered the sounds and smells she had locked away. Those who saw her not as a curiosity, but as a mirror. One man left a photo at the counter. Another, a medal she tried to refuse. A young woman with trembling hands simply whispered, "Thank you for not hiding." By noon, the mood in the diner had transformed from curiosity to reverence, but not the kind Emily had feared. No one put her on a pedestal. No one made her into a statue. They saw her, fully. And when Travis returned, alone without his crew, he didn't sit at his usual table. He stood awkwardly at the counter, hat in hand, waiting until there was no one between them. "I don't deserve your time," he said quietly, "but I need to say this anyway." She raised an eyebrow, cautious but listening. "I was raised to think strength looked a certain way. Loud, tough, in control. But watching you yesterday, standing there, taking all that, and still showing up today, it made me realize I don't know the first thing about real strength." He looked like he was bracing for impact, but Emily simply nodded. "Change doesn't start with knowing everything," she said. "It starts with knowing you were wrong." Travis nodded. "Can I come back?" "As long as you respect every person who walks through that door," she said, turning back to the coffee machine. The transformation didn't end at the diner. Within a week, Rusty's had set up a wall of honor, a simple board lined with Polaroids and dog tags, names scrawled in Sharpie beneath smiling faces. It wasn't just for soldiers. It was for anyone who had carried something quietly: nurses, teachers, firefighters, even a woman who'd survived cancer alone and unspoken. The community had started to change, and Emily, reluctantly, had become the quiet force behind it. But it wasn't easy. The recognition brought weight. People asked questions she wasn't ready to answer. Some brought trauma of their own, dumping it at her feet like stray dogs seeking shelter. Jack helped where he could, stopping by whenever he passed through town, but even he could tell it was beginning to wear on her. Visibility had its price. One night, long after closing, Emily sat alone in the booth by the window. A stack of thank you notes, letters from veterans' kids, and old photographs littered the table. Her hands hovered over them, unsure whether to keep them or burn them. They were tokens of gratitude, but they were also chains to a past she had barely survived. Jack slid into the seat across from her without a word. "You should be sleeping," she said. He nodded toward the notes. "So should you." She gave a tired smile. "Is it possible to be seen and still be whole?" Jack thought for a moment. "Being seen doesn't break you. Hiding does." She stared at the note in her hand. It was from the little boy, the one who had asked if it hurt. His crayon handwriting was crooked and honest. "You're my hero because you smiled anyway." Emily blinked hard. "I didn't save all of them," she whispered. "No one ever does," Jack replied. "But the ones you did, they never forgot. And now neither will this town." 6 months passed. Rusty's became more than a diner. It became a place where stories were allowed to breathe. A high school history class came weekly to interview veterans. A local charity raised money for a shelter dedicated to trauma survivors. Emily spoke at her first public event, her voice shaking but steady as she told the story of one soldier who had died in her arms, and how she still carried his name in the silence of her mornings. She had never planned to be anyone's inspiration, but perhaps she had always been one. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the Rockies and painted the sky in streaks of orange and ash, Emily closed up the diner, her apron folded neatly on the counter. She walked into the quiet street, the wind tugging gently at the sleeve that no longer covered her scars. Jack was waiting by his truck, arms crossed, the marine cap shadowing his face. "You ready?" he asked. She looked back at the diner, the lights glowing warmly, the photographs still hanging behind the register. "Yeah," she said. "I think I am." They drove out of town in silence, the road stretching forward like a second chance, the stars beginning to bloom above them. Emily Carter had once buried herself to survive. Now she was learning how to live. What part of Emily's journey spoke to your heart the most? If this story touched you, comment 100 below. Tell us where you're watching from. We love hearing from every corner of the world. Share this video with a friend who needs to hear it. Thank you for watching Life Stories.